10. Maya Autry. In a series of Instagram posts that eventually landed her on the NYPD's wanted list back in 2019, a woman named Maya Autry shared footage of herself trespassing inside an African lion exhibit at the Bronx Zoo and taunting the dangerous big cat from inside the enclosure. During that visit, she also allegedly entered a giraffe exhibit. Police politely asked Autry to turn herself in, but she instead posted a video of herself rapping and taunting the authorities. When reporters caught up with her outside a courthouse in Kearney, New Jersey, where she was facing a shoplifting charge for an unrelated case, she had not yet surrendered to the NYPD for the zoo incident. She said she would turn herself into authorities in the neighboring state, but not yet, adding that she has pro-law enforcement stances. Autry then launched into what the New York Daily News described as a bizarre 15-minute rant, describing her experience in the lion enclosure as spiritual and saying that she wasn't afraid of the lion because the lion loved me. After making some odd references to reincarnation and positive thinking, she even said, "I am the lion now. Can't you tell?" Autry eventually surrendered to the cops, only to miss her next court date and disappear for almost a whole year. She crossed paths with police again in late 2020, when she was found in a severely distressed mental state along a stray pier in Coney Island. In October 2021, 2 years after first making headlines for her strange behavior in the zoo incident, Autry was seen on video entering the lion exhibit once again, this time with a handful of roses in her hand. In this clip, she was talking to the big cat while tossing money at him. It's unclear what became of either of her zoo-related criminal cases. Hopefully she's being kept in a safe location, since it's clear she's not in a sane state of mind. 9. Dean Manning. After skipping probation in Norwich, England during early 2023, a short TikToker named Dean Manning bragged to his followers about his ability to hide from law enforcement. In one video, the 34-year-old was seen walking past a police station while saying, "I shouldn't really be here, should I?" Another post, which popped up in a private group, said, "Let's see how long it takes for me to get caught." Manning also posted a video clarifying that he's taller in high heels and that he would have surrendered if the police hadn't put the wrong height in their wanted post. The smart-mouthed social media personality's cocky attitude backfired when members of the media and the public came forward with information that helped police officers quickly track him down. By then, it seemed like things weren't going too well, though. Shortly before his capture, he panhandled his followers, asking for money to finance his life on the run. Before his most recent capture, Manning was on probation for attacking his ex-lover while high on both drugs and alcohol. When he failed to check in with his probation officer, he knew it meant he'd go back to prison for the rest of his 18-month sentence. He also probably knew he couldn't run forever, and instead of getting the rest of his time over with, he just decided to avoid it for as long as he possibly could, which wasn't that long. 8. Brian Cortez and Jamie Monteza. The family of a 91-year-old woman named Margaret Collins was horrified when someone showed them a Snapchat video of two caregivers making fun of the elderly woman at a suburban Chicago nursing home back in 2018. The footage, which was captioned "Margaret hates gowns" with 2 laughing emojis, showed one of the nursing assistants shoving a hospital gown toward Collins while she resisted it. After being informed of the video, the facility launched an internal investigation and suspended the employees who were involved, 20-year-old Brian Cortez and 21-year-old Jamie Monteza. The allegations were initially deemed unsubstantiated, and the 2 staff members were allowed to return to work, though. In a lawsuit, the senior citizen's family claimed that Margaret's health deteriorated after the incident because of her ongoing fear of a repeated attack, even after she was moved to a different nursing home. The litigation argued that employees who taunted Margaret knew she suffered from a fear of medical gowns, and they were purposefully upsetting her by waving one of the garments at her and telling her to put it on. After seeing the video, police arrested both Cortez and Monteza on suspicion of disorderly conduct. The nursing home also rethought its decision to let the 2 women return to work and ultimately fired them. Cortez pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 months of supervision, along with 100 hours of community service. Monteza pleaded guilty to attempted unauthorized recording and was sentenced to a year of supervision along with 50 hours of community service. 7. David Pomianek and Michael Duranzo Jr. During his shift at a public works building in Camden County, Pennsylvania in April 2007, a 28-year-old man named Stephen was lured by two of his co-workers into an equipment storage cage. David Pomianek and Michael Duranzo Jr. then locked the cage from outside while it was located 17 feet off the ground and began taunting Stephen, who's black, with racist insults. This went on for somewhere between 3 and 10 minutes right in front of other employees. Pomianek and Duranzo were eventually arrested for their behavior, which, according to prosecutors, went beyond horseplay and specifically targeted the victim due to his race. Duranzo pleaded guilty to a reduced disorderly persons charge, while a jury found Pomianek guilty of 2 counts of bias intimidation and 1 count of official misconduct. He was sentenced to weekends in jail for over 5 years, followed by 4 years of probation. Despite this, the case was far from over. Pomianek challenged his conviction and was ultimately cleared of criminal wrongdoing, so the case was thrown out on the basis of a small legal technicality. But the man was banned from seeking reinstatement at his job or in the public employment sector, so at least there were some repercussions. 6. Logan Hale. In 2015, the Florida Polk County Sheriff's Office made a Facebook post asking the public for help tracking down 21-year-old Logan Hale, who was wanted on suspicion of burglary. He'd been accused of breaking into a house and stealing a shotgun and jewelry. There was also a $500 reward for information that could lead to his arrest. Using an account by the name of Logan Finally Free Hale, the young man commented on the post of himself, stating, "Hello, here I am." The sheriff's office responded quickly, urging Hale to do the smart thing and simply turn himself in to avoid further consequences. He wrote back, "Deputies continue to look for me, but are frustrated that I am unable to be located." In a last-ditch effort to get Hale to give himself up, a deputy wrote, "Remaining at large is only going to result in your having to change your Facebook name from Finally Free to Back in Jail." The fugitive was once again asked to turn himself in, and the sheriff's office also offered to pick him up. 2 days later, a pair of deputies saw Hale in a car while out searching for him. They pulled the vehicle over and took him into custody on charges of armed burglary, grand theft of a firearm, theft over $10,000, and dealing in stolen property. Authorities also arrested 2 women who allegedly helped Hale hide from law enforcement and charged them with giving false information and interfering with an investigation. In a Facebook post announcing Hale's arrest, Sheriff Grady Judd revealed his talent for rhyming, saying, "Logan Hale, you're on your way to jail. Your attempts to hide were to no avail. Maybe you'll make bail. Either way, your Facebook taunts were an epic fail." 5. Melanie Clark. The United Kingdom's first murder case in 2018 was marked by the death of 44-year-old Melanie Clark just a few minutes after midnight on New Year's Day. Earlier that night, she and her husband, David, had gone to a party at a friend's house. Hours later, David called emergency services to report that he stabbed Melanie. The press was quick to report that the husband had flown into a rage after his wife mocked the size of his genitals. He was arrested for murder. In court, he argued that Melanie often made fun of him during their relationship, causing him to feel inadequate. David also claimed that Melanie insulted him in other ways and openly admitted to cheating on him. Prosecutors, on the other hand, described David differently. They said he was controlling and cruel, claiming that he often lost his temper and was vengeful when Melanie didn't react to the text messages he sent her. At one point, Melanie even asked her husband to leave their home. The judge overseeing the case acknowledged that there may have been some provocation on Melanie's part, but that she was ultimately brutally attacked without warning. David was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum time served of 15 years. Writing for The Guardian, journalist Janie Starling criticized the way the media depicted the New Year's case, making it seem like Melanie antagonized David to the point of driving him to commit the murder. From that angle, the story seemed more favorable toward the accused killer and not the victim, who's no longer able to defend herself or tell her side of the story. Starling called on fellow journalists to put an end to what she called the irresponsible reporting of domestic homicides, and to take a more dignified and less speculative approach in the future. 4. James Elijah Dixon. During a drug and alcohol-fueled party at his Philadelphia row house back in 2016, 45-year-old James Elijah Dixon started to get increasingly paranoid as the night dragged on into the early morning. At the same time, one of his guests, 46-year-old Kenneth Stowe, repeatedly taunted him with homophobic insults, causing him to become even more agitated. Around 3:30 in the morning, Dixon went upstairs for a short time and returned to the party with a 12-gauge shotgun. He shot Stowe right in the face, then fired at another guest, 25-year-old Zion LeBoy, who took a bullet to his arm. Afterwards, Dixon walked up to Zion's father, Edwin Capone LeBoy, and shot him in the head as well, before firing at 33-year-old Christine Chromiak while she desperately sought safety in the kitchen. Kenneth Stowe, Edwin LeBoy, and Christine Chromiak died from their injuries. Zion LeBoy survived the gunshot wound to his arm along with 3 others who managed to avoid getting hit by stray bullets. Dixon called 911 and surrendered to police 90 minutes later after a short standoff. He agreed to a bench trial in exchange for having the death penalty taken off the table, and insisted throughout the court proceedings that he acted in self-defense since he thought the victims were going to kill him. Unconvinced by Dixon's claims, the judge found the defendant guilty of 3 counts of murder and sentenced him to 3 life sentences without parole. 3. Eugene Matuzevich. 34-year-old Eugene Matuzevich was irrationally mad after getting a ticket for making an illegal turn in Bethesda, Maryland back in 2015. Even after going to court, paying a $50 fine and no conviction, he couldn't let go of his rising anger. Instead of simply moving on with his life and getting over it, Matuzevich tracked down the personal cell phone number and social security number of Officer Dominic Stanley, who wrote the initial ticket. He then barraged the cop with over 25 taunting text messages, saying things like, "You there, fat boy?" and "On a donut break, applying for welfare." In one message, he mocked the policeman for driving a Honda Civic and said, "No wonder you hate people like me with nice cars," sizing the cop's car up against his own BMW. Stanley also received multiple phone calls for his requests for information about receiving addiction treatment, which he never signed up for. At one point, he responded to the text messages, telling Matuzevich to stop talking to him. 2 days later, Matuzevich replied with an agreement to stop, followed by even more insults and a snarky spelling correction of a message Stanley sent. Matuzevich took his harassment campaign further by contacting the officer's father on social media, saying that his son was a glorified mall cop and sarcastically adding, "You must be so proud." Most people don't get away with talking to police officers like that, and Matuzevich was no exception. Authorities charged him with 3 counts of misuse of a phone and 1 count of harassing electronic communication, which are all misdemeanors carrying up to 10 years in prison. The case quickly went viral, and Matuzevich changed his attitude fast, especially after losing 2 jobs thanks to the negative publicity he received. He enrolled himself into anger management and psychotherapy, and performed over 75 hours of community service without being ordered to do so, in hopes of proving to the court that he was remorseful and capable of changing. After pleading guilty to the harassing communication charge, he apologized for his actions. Matuzevich also wrote a personal apology letter to Officer Stanley. In the end, he was sentenced to 18 months probation. 2. James Rackover. In 2016, 26-year-old Joey Comunal traveled to Manhattan from his home in Stamford, Connecticut for a night out with some friends. They decided to party at a club in the meatpacking district until closing time at 4 o'clock in the morning, at which point Joey went to another after party. When he failed to show up at his family's home for Sunday dinner the next day, and when his friends weren't able to reach him, they knew something was wrong. The man's loved ones embarked on a frenzied search for Joey and tracked down a woman who went to the after party with him. She said that Joey walked her out to her taxi when she left and that she watched him go back inside the building. Lawrence DeLeon, who was also at the party that day, insisted that Joey never came back inside after walking the woman to her cab. Another guest, Max Gemma, claimed he fell asleep drunk and that there was nobody in the apartment when he woke up, so he just left. Police immediately realized that the apartment's owner, James Rackover, was behaving strangely. While looking through surveillance footage of the apartment building in hopes of tracing Joey's movements, Rackover entered the lobby and told NYPD detective Yeoman Castro good luck getting that video. Another time, early on in the search, he approached Castro again and said, "Good thing I spoke to my girlfriend last night. She says I was in the apartment all night," as if to taunt the cop that he had a solid alibi. But the footage proved Rackover did leave the building, contrary to his many claims, and when Yeoman asked him about where he went, he reportedly lost his temper. The video also showed Joey re-entering the property after DeLeon insisted he left and never came back. While rummaging through the building's garbage cans, police found blood-soaked towels inside a comforter bag with Rackover's name printed on it, along with Joey's ID and credit cards. More evidence turned up during a search of the interior of Rackover's apartment, including a large amount of blood that had been sloppily cleaned up. When put under pressure during questioning, DeLeon admitted that Joey was dead and revealed the location of his body in a shallow grave dug deep in the New Jersey woods. He'd been stabbed to death and had other injuries indicating that whoever killed him had tried to dismember his body into pieces but failed. Joey also had multiple broken bones, leading detectives to think his body had been thrown out Rackover's window onto the sidewalk far below. DeLeon told police that he punched Joey after the two got into a fight over drugs at the after-party, but claimed Rackover was the real killer. He also admitted that Max Gemma had in fact passed out drunk like he claimed, but that he awoke to the sounds of violence. At that point, DeLeon ordered him to leave the building. DeLeon and Rackover were charged with second-degree murder and pointed the finger at each other throughout the court proceedings. Convinced that Max Gemma had seen Joey's body in the apartment before being forced to leave, authorities also charged him with hindering prosecution. A witness claimed that Rackover bragged about carrying out the murder, while a dented ring belonging to DeLeon, which was found at the crime scene, pointed toward his involvement. Rackover was convicted of second-degree murder and was later sentenced to 28 years to life in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence, insisting that he only helped get rid of Joey's body. DeLeon pleaded guilty to a reduced manslaughter charge and received a 23-year sentence. Gemma served a short 6-month sentence for failing to disclose everything he saw at the crime scene that night and is now a free man. 1. Antonio Beatty. Accused murderer Antonio Beatty made headlines across the US back in 2015 when he smiled and stuck his tongue out at his victim's family in the middle of the courtroom. He showed no remorse, stating that the family was just lucky he didn't do more than that. Prosecutors claimed Beatty was responsible for killing 25-year-old Carlton Whitley, who was found shot to death in a parking lot in Wilmington, North Carolina. The murder weapon was never found, but an eyewitness allegedly identified Beatty as the shooter, and authorities claimed DNA evidence put him at the scene. Beatty pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence. His distasteful display toward the victim's family happened during his first court appearance. The young man's uncle Anthony apologized to Whitley's family, stating that the way Beatty acted did not reflect the man he knew, who he described as a good guy who mostly stayed out of trouble. Anthony said that Beatty's loved ones didn't know if he actually committed the shooting. Over the next 7 years, the case dragged on through the court system, one delay after another. It finally went to trial in 2022 after Beatty refused to take a plea deal, saying that he refused to admit to something he didn't do. His attorney, Bill Paragoy, argued that the murder scene was pitch black during the shooting, making it difficult for a witness to reliably identify a suspect. One of the state's star witnesses backed out of testifying at the last minute, and Paragoy later told WECT that the witnesses who did testify weren't convincing. The prosecution also failed to identify a motive for the crime, which weakened the case. After all, as Paraguay put it, people don't just shoot each other for the hell of it. While Beatty's courtroom behavior during his initial appearance didn't exactly speak well to his character, he actually had no criminal history. All things considered, it was hard to believe that a man with no past convictions, a family to feed, and no reason to kill Whitley would suddenly decide to shoot him one day. The jury eventually found Beatty not guilty, leaving Whitley's family feeling betrayed and let down by the justice system. They remained convinced that he got away with murder. Sadly, there's nothing they can do about it. Thanks for watching. If you had a co-worker who constantly picked on you, would you report it to your superiors, deal with it on your own, ignore it, or handle it some other way? Let me know in the comments below.